All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Modern App Dev and Oracle REST Data Services Developer Lab. My name is Tara Van Cleve, and I'm a Marketing Event Manager for the Developer Initiative here at Oracle. Today, we're excited to show you how to create a REST service using Oracle REST Data Services on an autonomous database. If you do not currently have an Oracle Cloud account, we encourage you to create one now. We'll be recording today's session, so if you'd like to follow along with the lab walkthrough and then complete the lab later on at your own pace, we'll be sending the link to the recording in the next couple of days, and it will also be available on the Modern App Dev series page and the Oracle Developer YouTube channel. You'll also have the opportunity to participate in a short quiz on the material covered in today's lab. Upon completing the quiz, you'll receive a Developer Masterclass badge that you can share to your social media, recognizing your commitment and earned expertise. If you have any questions during the lab, please ask them in the Q&A area, and we'll have solutions experts Jeff Smith and Dan Gainey available to answer them throughout the session. Today's lab will be presented by Brian Spendolini, Senior Principal Product Manager. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Brian.
All right. So we've already had a question in the chat about, how does Oracle charge for the, a free resource and what happens and whatnot. And I know there's been a lot of questions about this because certain other vendors or other cloud services may charge you for the fun of it or what happens, throughout your trial. But with an always free account, Oracle's not going to charge you if you're using always free resources. And so I put this link in the Zoom chat here to talk about exactly what is included with the always free resources and what resources you have available to you. So this web page here, and again, I put this in the chat, you can take a look. It shows you what pieces of OCI you can use, how much storage you get free, which compute instances or compute types you can get is free, which databases and which pieces of our OCI cloud you can get free. And again, the always free autonomous database, which we are going to be using today. But there are a lot of pieces like virtual cloud networks, load balancers. You get about 20 gigabytes of object store to use, as well as block volume to attach to it. So this is something to take a look at today when you have your always free account and what you can use and what you can't use. And most of the stuff we do have is free. There are some, when you start using the larger shapes or the larger databases or the other resources, you'll actually see and it'll say, hey, your credits are going to be used for this, and then you have a nice little dashboard that shows you what actually, if you do want to continue using the resources you have chosen to use and use your credits against, what you're going to be charged per month. But I can tell you, I have an always free account. I used it for a lot of the demos that we do for our customers, and it's running some the ARM compute as well as some always free database. And it is an always free account, and I've yet to be charged for it. We also use one of the ARM servers for my son as a Minecraft server for his friends, and we have yet to be charged for that. I know, what a great use of Oracle resources. So let us start. And what we're going to start here is with our account sign up real quick. So let's just go through this account. So you all would have gotten a link, and the link is also in the chat. And when you sign up here, you have to use the email that you use when you registered for this web conference. So using this link, and the link is in the chat, you choose your country where you're going to. Just grab that, and then we will add your name. And this is the Gmail account I have. And there we go. And then here's my email. All right, now you're going to click this, and it's going to ask you to recognize trucks. That's a bus. That looks like a truck. That's a truck. That's not a truck. That's a truck. Let's see if we could find all the trucks today. That's a fire truck. I don't know if that counts. Just verify this. All right, and it says verify my email. It's going to pop up something and says, oh, I see that this is for the free trial account. Select the offer. All right, I have the offer, and then it's going to ask for some passwords. And so here you can, set up what password you want to use for this account. We'll go ahead and put a password in here and then put in there. And then company name, if you have it, this is an optional, your cloud account. So what your cloud account is going to be, and then what region you have. So here you can choose from any one of our, I think 30 something regions that we have for the Oracle Cloud, which one you want to use. I think we'll pick San Jose today and then continue. And then we could put our address in here. And this, I believe, if I remember, is the address to our Reston office I used to work out of a long time ago. That's myself, if you want to call me, I don't mind. And then we agree, and then we click this Start My Free Trial. And this is going to launch me directly into our free trial here. So it's really easy to do. It's really easy to sign up to get this cloud account going. And that's pretty much all you have to do. Now, eventually you'll get an email that says, hey, you know, here's your cloud account and here's how to sign into it. And then once you have that email account, you're ready to go. So that is how you sign up for an account. If there's any questions, then, you know, again, we have all these into the chat on how to do this. And then once this finishes, and we'll just give this a second to finish, we'll be able to jump right into the lab. So let me pause here for a minute or so for anyone who did not sign up for an account, can just finish this up. And then after that few seconds, we will jump right into creating our database if you haven't created the database, and then we'll start with the lab. So let's just give this a minute or so. So once you've signed up for the account and everything is done, you will receive an email, and it's going to have your account details and all sorts of good stuff like that in there for you to take a look at and use. Just remember your password, and I, of course, forgot my password already, but that's fine. And then you see this banner appear. This is an always free account. And again, you can upgrade it anytime. This is something you can do. So what we're going to do now is, now that we have this account and it should be completed because I have the email, we're going to go in there and we're going to start creating an autonomous database for us to use for this lab. So what we also have here is the link to the lab, and that is in the chat as well, but I'll put this into the chat as well, so you have a link to the lab, and there's actually a shorter link to the lab that's somewhere that you can take a look at. I think it's above. If you scroll up in the chat, you'll see the shorter link, but you can click on that and that'll take you to the lab instructions. But now that we're in our accounts, so I'd ask everyone to log into their accounts here. And you'll use the little menu up here, and we're going to go to Oracle Database, and we're going to go to the Autonomous Database right here. Go ahead and click on that. And this is going to bring us to our autonomous database here. And we have a compartment here. We'll just use the root compartment for this. You can move these around. You can change it later, but just to make things easy, we'll just create it in our root compartment. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an autonomous database. And this is actually a very fast process. So once we're all here on this page, we're going to go ahead and click the Create Autonomous Database. We're going to get this little slider that comes out. So first, we'll start with the display name. So, you know, we can call this, you know, the lab database, lab DB. The database name will be the same, lab DB. That's fine, doesn't really matter. Here's your workload type. For this, we can use transaction processing. There are other flavors of the autonomous database for certain uses, but for what we're going to use, general purpose, the transaction processing is perfectly fine. We'll keep this to shared. And then here's this button, always free. We'll just slide that over. And now this is an always free database. So this database we're creating, it will not charge you anything. Post your credits expiring in a month. Again, if you keep this running, you again will not be charged for it. So database version here, we can choose between 19C and 19C. So we can just keep it on 19C for now. And then the administrator credentials, this is how we're going to log in. Go ahead and put a password here. Now, the password does have to be of a certain amount of characters. So I'll just put this in again. So the password has to be between 12 and 30 characters, contain at least one uppercase, one lowercase, and one number. And it can't contain double quotes, and it can't use the word admin. So you can have admin 123 or something like that. Okay, so once we have that, we're basically going to choose all the defaults left here, and we're just going to hit the Create Autonomous Database button here. And that's going to go ahead and create it, because now this is my account, I believe, is still being set up. So it's going to hold back on me for a second, and I have one running in the background anyways. So what we can do is we'll try again in a second. So hopefully your account has set up and you have started creating your database. Now, if your database is creating, it's going to take probably maybe 2 minutes, 1 minute. It depends on how long it's going to take you to do it. But usually it does take about a minute or so to do the database here. So we'll just give everyone a second to get that database up and running. Just give it 2 minutes or so. If anyone's having any issues, just go ahead and put it into the QA or the chat, and we can see if we can address it. But this is pretty straightforward here on what we're doing, so it shouldn't cause anyone any issues. Okay, so it looks like we're just going to wait for a couple minutes for the accounts to just finish creating. So we'll just give it a second here. We'll just pause for a second so we can get these accounts just finish creating. Let's see if you're going to let me do it now. Yeah, let's just give it a second. I think probably got a whole bunch of requests coming in at the same time. And once this little banner goes away, we'll be able to start up. So let's just hold here for a second. So while we are waiting for this, what we can do is we can take a look at the actual lab guide. So go ahead and you can get that. Thank you, Tara. Get that and grab that and put that into into a browser, and we can take a look at the lab guide here and what's going on. So once you have the lab guide up and going, the first one, lab one here, is provision an autonomous database. And you can hit this little button here that says expand all tasks, and we'll be using this a lot. And what it does is, if you've forgotten what we've done, you can go through here, and we have these little pictures and these guides to go through that walk you through actually creating the database, how you do it, what to click on and whatnot. So we kind of saw it already with what we had. So this shouldn't be an issue, just to really quickly create the autonomous database. In the next slide we're going to have, which we're going to start as soon as these databases are created, and again, we'll give it a second for our accounts to finish provisioning, is we're going to go to connecting to an autonomous database. And so this is where we're going to leave off. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to pause for a second here and give everyone's accounts time to finish provisioning, and then we will just jump back in a minute. So let me give it about 30 seconds here. When you're signing up, if it is asking for a payment, what's happening is you're using a different email address than you signed up for registering for the course, because we took all the emails that were registered for the course and we put them into a special list, so that when you use the URL, it would recognize that email and allow you just to go through and take that offer. So if you do getting a payment, just double check the email you signed up for that process. Now, if you are seeing between 19 and 21C, 21C is our newest database. We just released that for in the cloud overall. It was in, I think, preview mode, but now it is fully released, and that's our newest database with the newest features in it. So that is, if you'd like to choose 21C, then you can do that. If not, then you can keep 19C as the release database. I know a lot of folks have been using 19C on premises and what they need to do here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at when we have the database created, what to do next with it. So let me just share my screen here. So once your database is created, you'll see the database, you'll see it's available, and you'll see all the information about that database going on there. So what we need to do here is we need to use the tab here. So you see the sub tab here, and one of the tabs is tools. And this is what we're going to do next. Now, I want to quickly look at this. If you want to see more information about your particular database, the Performance Hub here is a feature we have added that will basically show you some information about your database, the top SQL, what's running. So it's kind of like an enterprise manager type report that's running, and you can see the performance of the database. You can see the top SQL here, and some of the information about your user sessions. Now, this is nice because it just kind of is a fold out, and you can see this at any time. The other important thing here is when you hit this more actions, the administrator password here. So if you do forget your password that you just used to create your database with, which happens all the time, what you can do is you can go in here and reset that administrator password to be whatever you want. So again, if you did need to do this, then you can reset that password for the administrator account, and we'll see using that. So hopefully when you created your database, you do remember that particular one, that administrator password. So again, we're here on the database details of what we just created. And then we'll see the information. Now, I was able to, so this is, you should be able, I think that the accounts are probably now slowly provisioning. So you should be able to go ahead and double click on that on your database, or click on that create database, and your databases should start creating now. So we'll just give that a second, and I'll show you real quick. So as that database creates, what's going to happen is that you're going to see the name of the database again, and it's going to be in a provisioning status. And some of the features like here will be grayed out until this is finished provisioning. Again, provisioning for an autonomous database takes a minute or so, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. It's quite fast. And then also for this, you'll see the actions here. We see it provision right there. And then we see all of our buttons and tooling and everything available and start working. So that is done. And again, you'll see this always free banner here. And if I jump back out of here, you'll see that whenever you have an always free resource within the cloud, you'll see this always free banner here. So for example, if I went and created a compute instance with our new ARM processor, I know that's the big popular thing here is using the ARM servers that we have in our cloud. You can create some of these ARM servers, and you'll see that this always free label will be next to it. If you go in, as I said, if you create a load balancer, you want to try things with a load balancer in front of your compute instances, you'll see the always free tag here. And again, once this account rolls out of a trial account in a month and it goes to a regular account, if it's full of the always free stuff, you'll never be charged. And on the dashboard, you can actually see over here, as your account goes, you'll see a list of anything you're being charged for. We also have the charging metrics over in, where is it? I think it's in governance. You can actually do a cost here. Cost analysis. You can actually do a cost analysis report on what you're being charged for. So if you do use stuff and you want to see how much things are going to be costing, you can go ahead and do this in costing by service, and it'll give you a quick report of how much things cost per month that you're using. This is if you're burning through those $500 worth of credit. So if you wanted to try, a database VM, or maybe another of one of our services in here, and you see we have a lot of services you can try here. You charge for that. Once that rolls off, you'll see how much it is to continue using that per month. But again, if you're only using things that have the always free moniker on them, like again, our autonomous database here, you won't be charged for the account. All right. So as we have this, hopefully people's databases are coming up and starting up. So what we can do here is we can continue on with this lab with logging into the database. So again, now that I have this Always Free account here and I have my Always Free Autonomous database, I'll go ahead and click in here. And then again, we're using this sub tab and we're going to go into the Tools sub tab. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this item here called Database Actions. So Database Actions is a suite of web-based tools that we have provided you for you working with your autonomous database. Now, database actions are something that not only can you use on our autonomous database, but if you're going to install or configure Oracle REST data services on any Oracle database, you actually have an option of using these database actions tools on any database you have. So if you wanted to install Oracle REST data services on a database you have on premises or back at your company or in a VM you're using or on another database in another cloud or this cloud, you can install Oracle REST data services. And one of the options when you install it says, would you like to install database actions or SQL Developer Web? And if you say yes, it'll configure and you'll be able to use all the tools we're going to be using today, but on your database that you want to use it on, besides an autonomous database. But if you're going to use it on an autonomous database, it's automatically configured and it's ready for you to use. So again, using this secondary tab here, we just go to the tools and we click on this Open Database Actions. And what this is going to do is going to pop up another tab and it's going to say Sign In. And what you can do is we have the admin user. So you're going to sign it as admin and hit next. And then what it's going to do is you're going to use the password you used to create this database with. So remember that password. And we're going to sign in with that particular password. And it's going to bring us to our database actions. Now, again, if you forgot the password that you created the database with, which happens, you can go back to our autonomous database details, hit more actions, and hit the administrator password option, and then reset the password. But hopefully you remembered what you did, and you're on our database actions page here. So this basically, if we look at our lab here, we've connected to our autonomous database, or we've created our autonomous database, and now we've connected to it using our database actions or SQL Developer Web. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create an auto REST enable a table. So if you want to follow along, what I'll do is I'll be showing you how to do this through the UI. If you get stuck or you have any questions, you can always refer back to the lab here. And the lab has, what to click on and where to go and everything. So if you want to refer to this later or do this again, or, share this with somebody, go right ahead. This is the lab link you have here. And again, we put it into the chat. And if you still can't get to us, let us know. We'll put it into the chat again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through actually doing the lab, and you can go ahead and click with me on the options or the things that we're going to be clicking on here. And we'll refer back to the lab for certain things because certain files we do have to download and move around. So I'll show you where to find those. Okay. So now that we're in database actions, again, we went to the tools, we clicked on database actions, that popped open a window, another tab, we used the admin user, and then we use our password that we created the autonomous database with. We should be seeing this database actions launchpad here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start here with the SQL workshop, SQL worksheet, SQL Developer Web. It's a tool of many names. And you go ahead and click this tile here. You can also get to it from the mega menu here by hitting SQL here. So you can go ahead and hit SQL there, or you can go ahead and click SQL here. What this is going to do, it's going to bring us into something that a lot of people, if you are familiar with using SQL Developer on your desktop, the client tool, you'll see a very similar workspace and a very similar user interface. You see, that we have our navigator here, we have the user that we're on, we have the tables or the objects we can look at. We can look at tables, views, indexes, packages, functions, procedures, triggers, all the stuff you're used to looking at with our SQL Developer UI. But we've moved that SQL Developer UI into the web so we can put it on top of any database, as I said. Now, while we're using the autonomous database for this, because as you saw, the database came up in about 30 seconds, all this stuff was pre-configured for you, you can install this on any Oracle database you have. So what we're going to do with the lab, we're going to refer back to the lab. We're going to basically load some data into this autonomous database, and we're going to use it with a CSV file, and we're going to do it by just grabbing this file and using our data loading tab here. So on the bottom, you see we have query results, script output, again, very similar to what we have with our SQL Developer tool, but we're going to go to the data loading. And it's going to give us this little section where we can drag and drop an XLS, an Excel file, a CSV, XML, JSON, or an Avro file. So back in our lab, if you scroll down a little bit, there's actually going to be a link. So on step 5, there's this link here that says CSV data. So what you can do is you can just click on this or right click and download the link. Click on that and download it and put it to your desktop or wherever you are, if you can do that. And it's going to save that file. And then so I'm going to save this to my desktop. And then it's a very small file, so it should take a second or so to download. So once I have that file on my desktop, what I can do is I can drag it and drop it directly into our UI here. So I have this data, this file here, and I'm going to drag it right there. And what it's going to do, it's going to pop open this wizard. And it's going to say, hey, here's what's in this file. Okay. And it should only be 7 rows. Again, this isn't the most best data in the world, but you'll see why we're using it and how we can do it. So it's going to say the file name, and it's going to show us the data preview of that data in the file. So once you see that, go ahead in this lower right-hand corner and hit next. And then it's going to give us, and it's going to say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do for this table. You know, I'm seeing letters, I'm seeing characters, I'm seeing a bunch of things. So we're just going to set it as varchar 4000, which is fine. So we can just keep these defaults. But here's where you can basically define a primary key if you wanted to. You can define a format mask for a date column if you had date columns coming in and you were loading data that way. There's a bunch of things you can do. Change the column type to whatever you wanted. If you're on a 21C database, we have our JSON type in here. If you were loading JSON data into the database, all these things you can do. But what we're going to do, we're going to keep these just the defaults we have here. We're going to leave the table called CSV data. So you can change the table name here, and we're going to hit the next button on the lower. So we're just going to leave the defaults and hit the next button. It's going to give you a preview of this is what I'm going to use. Here's my DDL. So if you wanted to cancel out of here and just create this table or have this code, you can go ahead and grab and copy paste that code. It's going to show the column mapping. So if I change the column names, so if I change column 1 to product ID or something else, it would show the column mapping we have here. Again, we're going to keep the defaults. There's actually nothing to change here, and we're going to click finish. And what this is going to do, it's going to start uploading that data, creating the table, and putting that data directly into that table. And again, it's a very small amount of data, so it should be done. And we see that it's done. 7 total rows went in, 0 failed, and that is done. Now, if we want to look at the data, we can go ahead and right click on this, and we could hit open. And what this is going to do is it's going to open the table, and we can look at some of the information about the table. So once this is loaded, now you drag it here, you accept the defaults, you see our table over here. We right click on this table and select open. And this is going to bring a slider out. And it's going to say, here's our columns. Here's a preview of our data. Again, the same 7 rows that we put in there. And again, all the other good stuff we can see. Indexes, partitions, if it's partitions, triggers, statistics, grants, constraints, all the information we want to see about our table, we can see it here. So again, real quick, we right click this, we go open, and the slider comes out, and we can see information about our table. And again, we can also see the data in our table. Now, if you wanted to just do old school SQL, we can always just do a select star from CSV. Now, what we also included with SQL Developer Web is we have a processing engine that actually will see our database objects and then give us suggestions about what we can do. So if I wanted to use CSV data, I just hit enter and it's going to autofill that for me. And then I can go ahead and I can run my statement here and we'll see the query result here. So either way, we can look at our data in our table. Okay, so we have data in our table. We've created our table. Now it's time to show you how to REST enable this table, or how easy it is to REST enable the table. So I'm going to refer back to our guide here. And in task 2, what we have is we have something called auto REST. So we can auto REST enable a table. So what that does is we have this table, we REST enable it, and we give you all the CRUD functions of the table. So it gives you APIs or REST APIs for creating rows, for deleting rows, for updating rows, for batch loading, and we'll take a look at that. Now, it's very easy to REST enable a table. There's no code involved. And as you see, everything that we're going to pretty much do today is approximately no code. It's very, very little code we're actually going to be working with today. So it's very easy to do. So again, back over here with our table, we right-click it, and we see this REST option, and we go ahead and we select Enable. So again, right-click the table, REST, and we hit Enable. And we're going to get this slider here. All right. So here we have our slider, and it's going to say, oh, here's the object name, the object type. We can put authorization on it, but we're going to talk about authorization later. And all we're going to do to REST enable is we just hit this button, Enable, and we're done. Now, with what we're doing today and with Oracle REST Data Services, you can enable lots of stuff in your database. You can enable a table. You can REST enable a view. You can REST enable functions. You can REST enable procedures. All of this stuff you can REST enable, and we'll actually take a look at that. Now, another important thing is when you REST enable a table or you REST enable a function or a view or whatever you're going to REST enable, we don't REST enable the entire schema. So we're not having all these objects thrown out on the internet unsecured for you, where they're just going to be hanging out there for people to discover. We only REST enable what you tell us to REST enable. So we have that level of security on there. And again, we'll talk about securing these REST APIs a little later down in the last part of this lab. So again, real quick review. We went here, we left click this, we went to REST, and we hit the enable. Now you can see it says disable. We also see this little plug, which basically signifies that this particular table or this particular database object is REST enabled. So what did this actually do? So again, if we right click on this, go to REST and go to curl commands and click on that, we're going to get the slider, and it's going to show you all the curl commands that we can use for REST for using against this table. So get all, get a single value, post, so basically creating. We can have batch load, we can have put, and we can have delete. So what we want to do is we want to look at this get all command. And what we can do is we can basically pick up this URL here. Now your URL is going to be a little different than mine. And we can copy this link. Or you can hit there, that'll copy the entire CURL command, but we just want this URL. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new tab. I'm going to put this in there. And it's going to show you that here it is. Here is my REST enabled data. And if we look at the raw data that's coming back, we can see that it's actually JSON. So it basically, we're getting all the rows out of that table, we're formatting it in JSON, and we're giving it as a REST enabled service. So if you had an application that you need to expose this data to, or an endpoint, or a mobile application, whatever you were developing, you could give it this REST endpoint, and it's now able to get this data, and you can just, take this JSON data, format it for the UI or for whatever is using it, and able to look at this data and display it all from this REST service. So you saw how easy it was to REST enable this table and use this REST service. All I needed to do was go here, load the data in with our data loading, drag and drop it in there. Now we have our table, we left clicked on it, we REST enabled it, and we were done. So it's very easy to REST enable objects within the database using Oracle REST Data Services. Now, what we can also do is back over in the autonomous database side here. We're going to use this a little bit more. We have this up here. We have this thing called the Cloud Shell. So the Cloud Shell, in essence, gives you a command prompt within the browser for working with resources within the OCI, the Oracle Cloud. So if you want to go ahead and click on this, what's going to happen is we're going to see this pop open on the bottom. It's going to say creating your Cloud Shell machine. And it's going to run. And we're going to be using this in the next lab here. So what we can do with this is we can actually take a look at the CURL commands that it is giving us back over in the Oracle REST Data Services or that SQL Developer Web. So while this is attaching, I'm going to go back over here, and you can follow along and do this as well. Right-click, REST, CURL commands, and we're going to just hit this get all. We're going to hit this right here. What it's going to do, it's going to copy this CURL command for me. Copy. Now we're going to go back over here, change tabs, and we're going to go to our Cloud Shell. And all I need to do is paste that command into the Cloud Shell and hit return and run it. And we can see that it's going to go ahead and we get the exact answer that we got from the browser. So we can work with CURL and with our web services or REST services right here directly in the Cloud Shell. Go ahead and clear. So it basically gives you a Linux prompt in the cloud for you to work with our services. And we're going to, as I said, we're going to work a little bit more with this later in our next labs. All right. So we saw that we had here, we have REST enabled our table. Now we're ready to move on. So if we go back to our lab guide, we're ready to move on to lab number 4, which is loading data into the database and creating business logic within that database. So what I'll do is I'll pause here for a second to see if make sure everyone's caught up and on the same page. And if there are any questions on what we just did, with our REST enabling that table, loading the data, grabbing that CSV file and putting it in there. Just make sure that we are all set. So let me pause here for about 15 seconds to see if any questions come over into the chat. So the first one is, how do we open Cloud Shell? All you do is click this little button. So we go back to the OCI console, the web console, and we click this little button right here. It says Cloud Shell, and it's going to open up the Cloud Shell on the bottom of the page. So in the main, not in SQL Developer Web, but over in our main tab using the, where we created and worked with our autonomous database and created it up here in the upper right-hand corner, Cloud Shell. So back in our lab guide. All right, how did we get to the DB? So once you've created your autonomous database, so real quick, you hit the autonomous database, you created it. Once your account was provisioned, you hit the Create Autonomous Database button. Our database came up. On this page, we hit the sub tab. We hit this tab, Database Actions. You click on Database Actions. You log in with the admin account and the password, and you come to our Database Actions page, and then we went to the SQL one. So you'll actually land here on this page, and we hit SQL, and we're worked on it from in here. So we're using it from the web UI. This is also on this in the lab, connecting to ADB, our autonomous database, with SQL Developer Web or Database Actions. You can follow it along in there as well. Okay, so let's move on here to lab number 4. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually use our CURL command in the batch load API to load a CSV file of about 2 million rows into the database. So in here, we go through building up the URL. So I'll help you with this. So back over in our database actions, very familiar, we're going to right click, REST CURL command. We have a batch load button. What we're going to do here is we want to use this and we want to take this format and we're going to fill in this format together. Okay. So while we work with this, what we need to do is open up a text editor. So if you are used to using Visual Studio I know that's a popular one a lot of people use. If you're used to working with, I don't know, Notepad or what have you. I mean, you could basically use any text editor you'd like to use. What I'm going to use here is I'm going to use Visual Studio because I have that open. BB Edit, Sublime Text, there's a million of them. But we're going to use the Visual Studio Code when we get there. So what we're going to do is we're going to build up this URL. So what we want to do is we want to take this entire URL and copy and paste it. So we're going to basically, once we have this, we're going to hit the batch load and hit this copy button. It's going to be copied, and we want to paste that into a, as I said, a text editor, whatever text editor you choose. Again, Notepad, WordPad, whatever you want to use. We're going to refer to our lab here, and we're going to build up the URL because there's some things we added to it to show timing and whatnot. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this URL up, and we're going to put it into the Cloud Shell. So first thing we're going to do is we actually need to go get this CSV file. So in the lab, on step number 5, there's a CRL command to go get this CSV file. So all you need to do is hit this copy button, go back to our Cloud Shell, and paste the command in to the Cloud Shell and hit enter. What it's going to do is it's going to go get this file and it's going to load it locally to our Cloud Shell. And you can see if we just do an ls, you can see that it's right there now loaded. So again, real quick, over here, we're going to grab this URL, again, hit the copy button, go back over to Cloud Shell. Again, we opened up Cloud Shell through this button here, and we paste it in, and we just hit enter. And that downloads that particular file to our local Cloud Shell machine. So if we do an LSL, LARPH, we can see that we have our file here. Where is it? There it is right there. It's about 61 megs big of a CSV file. All right, so that's step 1. We have our data locally to our Cloud Shell, and that's where we're going to load it. All right, back to our lab. So what we're going to do is we're going to build up this URL. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add this write out total time. And what that's going to do is it's going to spit back how much time it actually took to load these 2 million rows into our database using this REST URL, or this REST API that we created with AutoRest. So what you can do is you can go and copy this, and put it into our CSV file here. So if I go and share my CSV file, we have it here. What I'm going to do is we're going to build this up so I can basically just replace this top line right there. So we have CURL, total time, and we have that. Okay, let's continue to build this up. So we're going to go back to our page here. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add the command we want to run. This is going to be a post option. And we can actually skip a little bit farther down here, and we can go here. So what we can do is we're going to write out the total time. We're going to do a post. We're going to say, hey, I want you to post in this file I just downloaded, and the file type is CSV. Okay, so what we can do is we can actually grab this whole thing, go back to our text file, and we can put this in for the top line. So go ahead and do that. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to give it a username and password. So through this particular, when we run this URL and how we have authentication set up, we're just using basic database authentication. We will see in the next lab how to use this with an OAuth 2 and how we can pass tokens back and forth where we don't have to use an administrator and a password. But what we can do here is we can actually use this particular user So the admin and password. And so we add this to our CURL post here. So we have this right here, and we can go ahead and add this. So what we want to, in essence, do is we want to build this URL up to match what it looks like here. Now, this area here is what we copied and pasted and put into the text file. That's going to be specific to your autonomous database where it is. This one is in Frankfurt. You saw the demo one that I created was in San Jose. So we just want you basically to grab that URL and look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a look at what we have over here. So I'm going to use this here. So here's what we have in the lab, this whole thing. And then this is what we copied from the SQL Developer Web. So what I'm interested in, let's start with this, is this URL here. So we can take this URL and just go ahead with this URL here that we have in the lab guide and just replace this. So you're basically going to take the URL up there and you're going to replace it here. So take this URL all the way to the batch load and replace it here with batch load. Okay. So now we've taken this URL and put it here from the lab guide. You can actually, if you really want to, all you in essence need is this right here section, but you could take the entire thing. Next, we're going to do is we're going to put your password. Oh, this isn't your password here. We're going to take your password that you use for the admin user, and you're going to put it here, right here. So we have the admin user we created the service with. We have the password you use to create the database with, and that we logged into that SQL Developer Web. You've taken your URL we copied from the SQL Developer Web and initially posted here, and you replaced it here for this URL. So again, if we want to go real quick back to the lab, we have our lab. Step number 6, the last part of it, you would in essence copy this entire thing, paste it into a text editor. Over here in our database action SQL Developer, remember where it is? You go rest, right click rest, curl command, batch load. And then here we have the URL we want to use for that batch load. So putting it all together, we should have what I have here in my text editor, which is this right here. We've added this batch row. So what we're going to do, we're going to batch 5,000 at a time and then do a commit. And then if we hit 20 errors or more, we're going to fail the entire process and roll back. So these are some commands we've added just for correction. Now this should go in without a problem, but this is something that you can take with you if you were going to batch load later and use this in your application or another way of using this. So now that we have this final command here, what we can do is we can copy it, go back to our Cloud Shell here, and paste that command in. So we have it in our Cloud Shell and we pasted it in. I did my paste wrong here. So we pasted it in. And now all you have to do is basically press enter. And I think I pasted mine wrong, but let's give it a go here. You go ahead and paste it while I deal with my pasting issues that I'm apparently having. And it's just the URL doing it. And then we hit enter. And what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and take that CSV file that we had locally, and it's going to load it into our database using that batch load API that we created when we auto rest enabled the table. So it's going to run and usually takes around, and again, this isn't always free service with a little bit of memory and a quarter of a CPU, but loading in 2 million plus rows takes about 25 seconds, and there it is. So it took about 28 seconds to load all of that. So we processed 2,097,148 rows into our table. There were 0 errors, and it took 28.877 seconds to do. So you can see is using that auto rest enable, we have this batch API that we have on this table that we can use, say, for maybe you have a streaming service that you're constantly streaming files from somewhere and you want to stream them directly into the database, or you have large amounts of data coming from sensors or some kind of a device that you want to put all these pieces of data instead of a row at a time. They're coming in as files, or maybe a file hits an object store or a file or a file system somewhere, and you want to immediately take that file and load it into the database. You can use this batch API to do it. Now we're using curl to do it, but again, you can use Python, you can use JavaScript, you can use whatever type of language you want, but know that these APIs are available for you to use when you auto rest enable a table. Now, to make sure we actually did this, we can go back over into our SQL Developer Web, and we can do a select count star from our table. And this should say that we have over 2 million rows in this table. So we just do a select count, and there's our result. We have that data in there. So we have the rows that it added plus the 7 from the file that we have. So there it is. That's how you batch load. After rest enabling the table, we have all these APIs. Again here, right click, rest, CRL command. We have all these REST APIs that we're able to use for data loading, for data processing, for data manipulation, for exposing to our applications, our servers, our processes, our functions, our containers, whatever you want to use. They're all there for you to use when you rest enable a table. And again, as you saw, we didn't code a single thing. There wasn't a single line of code that we had to use. We had to go look something up. We had to learn a different language. Pretty much the only code that we ran was select count star from our table. And actually, I believe with the latest version of this, this will almost auto do everything. So if I do select count star from CSV, it actually writes the query for you, honestly. And you can run it again, and you'll see it here. So there's a lot of intelligence built in this. So you can see that this Oracle REST Data Services is a very powerful platform. Not only is it very powerful, but Oracle REST Data Services itself is free. It comes with a license for your database. So again, if you have an on-premise database, if you have a database that's not the autonomous database, in another cloud, in Oracle's cloud, in your server, on your desktop, in a virtual machine running on your desktop or someone else's desktop or laptop, what have you, you could install Oracle REST Data Services, point it at that database, and get all these features and functions for you automatically. All right. So did everyone have a successful batch load? Were there any issues with the batch load? Do you need to see any part of it again? Was anything confusing that we can clarify? Go ahead and throw it in the chat and we'll address it immediately. No? Okay. Then we can go on. Now, again, if you want to try this at your own pace, at your own speed, if I'm going too fast, if I'm going too slow, this is all part of the lab guide here. And it shows you how to run this. All right. Now, continuing on with this lab, what we need to do is we're going to put some very simple business logic into the database so we can show you how you can REST enable a procedure. And then we're going to go ahead and throw some more security on there to show you how to use OAuth 2 on these. So again, in our lab, step number 10 is our business logic. And we're going to put two sets of business logic in here. Again, this isn't really anything crazy. This one just does a select count and puts an output. So what we can do here is hit copy. It'll copy this code block here, go back to our database actions, and go ahead and paste that right in there. And then we hit this run script, and it's going to run this as a script. And then we're going to see that this was compiled successfully. So again, going here, hitting copy, going back to our SQL Developer Web, pasting it in here, and then hitting the run script. And that's going to compile that piece of logic. I think there's another one. If we scroll down a little bit more, there's one more here. And we can copy this one. And again, do the same exact thing. Go to SQL Developer Web, paste that in, hit the run script. And that's going to compile that. Or actually, it's just going to run. This is a test. So this is the test procedure. So what this basically does is it tests our procedure. It passes in A1, and then it outputs it. And you can see down here, that's our number. So logic is right here. Test is right here. So again, real quick, here's our logic, step number 10, copy, go here, paste it on in, and then hit the run script button. It's going to compile it. Back over in the lab, we have our test, which basically says output, we're going to declare a number. We're going to run this procedure. We're going to pass the value of A1, and then we're going to output the count from that procedure. Copy this. Back over here in our SQL Developer Web, paste it on in, and then hit again, run script. It's going to run that procedure quick, the PL SQL block, and you see that our output is 8,204. So it's just doing a count where that second column is equal to A1. Very easy. All right, so we have this, and we put those two pieces of business logic on there. Okay. That's it. That's end of lab number 4. So now we have lab number 5. And as I said here, we'll see how you can REST enable this particular one. But again, we can auto REST any of these objects in here that makes sense. So if I wanted to go to procedures, we see this procedure here. I can actually go and I can REST enable it. But we're not going to do that. We're not going to auto REST enable it. We're going to actually build it up and show you how to create a business logic REST enabled endpoint. And again, this works for tables, it works for views, it works for most objects within the database. All right, step number 5, or lab number 5. This is our second to last lab for the day, and we've got about a half an hour left. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create and REST enable first a custom SQL statement, and then we're going to REST enable a piece of business logic. So go over to the lab, because we're going to grab some of the values we have in the lab and paste them in there. And we're going to move down to step 2. I'll show you how to do this. So what we want to do is we want to go over to the creation of the REST for our REST workshop. So over in SQL Developer Web, we're going to use this mega menu up in the upper left-hand corner, and we want to click REST. And then we'll just stop the tour. We don't need the tour. We're going to hit X. So here is our REST workshop that we're going to work with. So first thing we need to do is we need to make a module. So we're going to go here and click on the module tab in the upper left. Once we're here, we're going to hit this button now in the upper right that says create module. So go ahead and click that. And we get our create module slider that comes out. So we're going to fill this in with some of the items we have in the lab. So if you scroll down to, I believe, starting at step 5, we're going to have these things. And all we need to do is just copy them and paste them in. So this is the module name. And so this is a live lab. We're going to call it that. Just copy that and then go back to our REST. And this is the module name. Our base path, we're going to leave and we're going to use API. So /API/. And if you don't want to type it, you can go back over here to the lab and just hit copy and then paste it in to here. All right. Now that we've done those two things, you go down here and hit the create button. So I have the name, I have the base path. Now I go down here and hit create. And that's going to create a module for us to work inside to create our 2 custom REST services. So the first custom REST service we're going to create is going to be a custom SQL statement. So what we're going to do to start here is we're going to hit the create template button. If you're not on this page, you can go back to the modules, click the title here, and it's going to bring us over to our template page. More than likely, you landed on this page after you created your module. So we're going to go ahead and hit create template. So first, we need to give it the URL template that we're going to use. And if we want to go back over into our lab, I'll show you what we're going to use. For this, we're going to use SQL report / :ID. And that basically signifies through the URL, we're actually going to pass in a parameter. So all you need to do is hit the copy, go back to our REST module, and paste this in. And that's it. Once you've done that, go ahead and hit the create button. And this will create that template. Now that we have the template, we have to actually put the SQL behind the template. So on the handler screen, we go hit create handler. And that's going to give us a slide out where we're going to build up this query. So again, create handler. And what we're going to use, we're going to use this SQL statement in the create handler. So go ahead and hit this copy button and put the SQL statement right where it says source. So we're going to leave the method as get and the source type collection query. So we're going to leave these defaults. We're not going to touch it, but we're going to paste the SQL statement directly into here. And that's it. We're done. We hit the create button. So creating a handler, we paste it in there. And once we're done, we hit the create button. All right. Now that we're on here, we can actually see what we have, and we can actually test the SQL directly from this page. So you see it's kind of like a mini SQL workshop here. So if I wanted to run this, I can go ahead and run this. And the cool thing is it's going to pop up a little pop-up here and it says, hey, I see you have a bind variable. What do you want to use for the value as we test this? And we want to use A1 and then hit OK. And then that's going to run our SQL. And then here we see the results from this. Just like that. So more than likely what you've done is you've built up your SQL query over in the SQL module, and you can basically come over here and preview it, make sure it works. And then if you need to edit it, you can edit it and then hit the save button, and that'll save the editing. So if you mistyped it over in the previous page, that slider, and it didn't work here, you can just check it and save it here. All right. So now that we have this, again, you created the template, we added this in there, we hit create, and now we have this and we tested this. What we're going to do is we're going to actually see this endpoint in action. And to see this endpoint in action, since it is just a simple URL with a bind variable at the end, all we need to do is hit this right here, this open a new tab. So I hit this open a new tab, and this is a new feature we actually added, and it's not in the lab, and I need to do this, is when we hit this open new tab, it says, hey, I see you have a bind variable. Let me pre-fill that bind variable for you so this REST service immediately works in this new tab. So again, we're going to use A1 and hit OK. And we see there's our report. And again, if you're using Firefox, Firefox will format the JSON. Chrome, there's an extension, and I think Safari, there's an extension you can get, but you may just see the raw data like this. So it's going to bring back the first 25 because we set 25 results back. And there it is. So this is, you may see this, the JSON that's coming back straight. So there it is. So we've just REST enabled a custom piece of SQL that we pass a bind variable into. Again, maybe this was a REST endpoint behind an application that you had a button that said check inventory for this item. And then you would pass the SKU or the item ID of that item on that web page or that mobile app they were using. It goes and hits this REST service. It passes in that SKU or that item ID here, and then returns maybe a count or a number or what have you. It just returns back that SQL. So you can see that it's very easy to create these REST endpoints. Now we have that SQL query. Let's go ahead and let's REST enable a piece of business logic. So if you remember that procedure that we created, let's REST enable that procedure. So back over into our lab. And what we're going to do is we've already done all this. We're going to go to task 2, which is REST enable business logic. You can actually get to it just by clicking this right here. So using the breadcrumbs here in our REST workshop, you want to click the module we created, the com.oraclelivelab.api. And that's going to bring us back here. And what we need to do is we need to create a new template for our business logic. So it's all under this module or this umbrella, all these groupings of web services. So we're going to go and hit create template. And our URI template is going to be pretty easy. So all we're going to do is we're going to basically say we want to call it BizLogic. So copy it and go ahead and put BizLogic for our URI template here. And we're going to leave everything else here and go ahead and hit create. And so that's created our module. Now we need to create the handler, or I should say the template. Now we need to create the handler. So go ahead and hit create handler. And we'll refer back to the lab for what we're going to change here. So that we have this handler done, we're going to change some things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the method from a get to a post. So in the UI here, back in the REST workshop, use the drop-down select list and go from get and select post. A lot of things went away. Some things came back. Source type is going to be PL SQL. And here's where we're going to put in our code. So again, back over in the lab, we actually have the code you can use. Hit this copy button, which is going to copy the code. You don't have to type it out. And go back over to our handlers and paste this code directly in. So again, over in the lab, step 9, task 2, hit the copy and just paste it directly in there. And that's it. We can hit the create button when done. We hit create, and that's going to create our handler. We need to do one more thing. We need to actually create a parameter that we can assign to the output. Again, remember, this just does a count and outputs the count. We need to actually have that so our REST service will return that count to us. So follow along in the lab here. What we need to do is we actually need to hit and create that parameter. And we do so here by clicking this create parameter button. So we're on our BizLogic, our post, we have our code here. Hit that create parameter button and we're going to get a slide out. Now, we're going to use some pretty simple names. For our parameter name is going to be output. And the bind variable name is going to be output. Now, if you don't want to type, again, over in the lab, I believe you can just copy and paste these in there. Okay. Next, the source type. Since we want to see this in our response back from the REST service, we change the source type to response. So using this select list dropdown, change the source type from header to response. And now the parameter type, we want to change from a string to an integer since it's a number. So again, parameter type using the select list dropdown, change to an int. Now, lastly, with our access method, this is going to be just for output. So we select output. So parameter name, output, bind variable name, output, source type is response. We change that from header to response. Parameter type is an integer. We change that from a string to an integer. And lastly, our access method is output. We change that from input to output. So once this looks like this, go ahead and hit create. And that has created our output variable. All right, so now it's time to test this. Go in the lab here. And what we can do back over in the lab is we can actually test this. So we need to get the CRL for this, and it actually has this. So going here and clicking on BizLogic right here. And here's our handler. We can actually click this little dot, 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 and it says get the CRL command. So we were on our actual defining of the template. What we did is we hit, using the breadcrumbs, we clicked on Biz Logic. Now that we see this template here, we can go ahead and hit get CRL command. All right. And so now it has created, here's our CRL command we're going to use. And again, we're going to use the Cloud Console to do this. But what we want to do is we want to fill in the ID, the input. So what we can do is hit this little plus sign here. And it's going to say, hey, I see you have two variables here. What do you want to do? And for our ID, put in A1 and hit OK. And you see that it's changed our CRL command to have that in there into the JSON that we're passing into this REST endpoint. Now that we have that constructed, we can hit this button here, which copies this command to the clipboard. Now that it's copied, we go back to our Cloud Console here, and we can paste that in. Oh, it signed me out. Hopefully it didn't sign you out. It timed out. I'm going to log back in here real quick. Remember? If it signs you out, then go ahead and log yourself back in. And we'll continue directly here. Actually, oh boy. Okay, so what we have here is we have our CRL, and what we can do here is we can go ahead and copy and paste this into our Cloud Console. So as I figure out my username here real quick, should take a second. Go ahead and copy and paste this into your Cloud Console. So I'm going to copy and paste it into my Cloud Console here. Here it is. Copy it. Paste it in. And I'm going to run it. And there is my output. My output is exactly what we wanted, 8204. Yes, you can only get to the Cloud Console from this main page right now. We are working to move that SQL Developer Web into the framework of this page, so you're able to use it here. But that is still a little bit off. This should be soon. Should be soon. So then you wouldn't have to be swapping back and forth as much between the two tabs. But yeah, you can only get to it from this page right here. All right, so that's how you enable business logic and custom SQL within our service here. Okay, so next is our security. So this is Lab 6 securing our service. I'm going to expand this right here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to actually put some security on these REST endpoints so that people cannot access them. So without our giving, so instead of using user password, we're going to use a token-based authentication. So back over into our modules here. What we're going to do is, if you're not in this particular one here, we're just go ahead and hit rest. Maybe you jump back. But now we're going to be working with security. Okay. So in security, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a role. So using this upper menu item here, go to security and click on roles. Once we're on this page, go ahead and hit the create role button. Now we just need to give this role a name, and using the lab here, I've actually put the name in here. You can copy it and just kind of paste it right into here and hit create. And that's going to create a role that we're going to use for our authentication. All right. Now that we've done that, next we need to create privileges. What privileges do we want to give to this particular role here? Okay, so again, using security, we hit privileges, click on privileges. And as always, we're going to go and hit this create privilege button, and we're going to have a slider come out. Okay, so now we need to label this privilege. So again, using the lab here, we have a label here for you. So we're going to call this the Live Labs REST privilege. So go ahead and copy it and then just paste it in here for our name as the label. For the name of this, go back over to the lab, and we're going to use the oracle.livelabs.privilege.admin name. Go ahead and copy that using the copy button and paste it into here. And the last thing is we need a description. Same thing going over here in the lab, hitting the copy button and pasting that into our descriptions field. All right. So now we have the privilege defined. Next thing we do is we need to use roles. Okay, so if you remember, we just created a role and we want to assign this role to this privilege. So over here in roles, go ahead and shuttle over the oracle.livelabs.roleadmin. So shuttling over, you can do it a couple ways. You can double click on it, or if it is highlighted, you can use the single arrow. Don't use the many arrow because then you're going to push everything over. We just want to use the single one. So go ahead and click on that. Now we have the role moved over there. Okay. Lastly, we need to go to protected modules. So we go to protected modules, and you see that this is the module that we just created in the previous lab. Go ahead here and shuttle that over to this side. And once we're done, we hit the create button down here. So privilege defined, Live Lab less privilege. This is the name, a description. For roles, we shuttled over the oracle.livelabs role that we created. And lastly, the protected module is the module that we created way back, I think, in the third lab. Once we're done, we hit the create button. And we have our privilege created. Next part, we're going to actually go and do an OAuth client. So again, REST module, security, we're going to go to the OAuth clients. So OAuth clients here, go ahead and click on that. And then when once on this page, we're going to hit the create OAuth client button. All right, so again, copy pasting, copy is OAuth client. Description, copy that, security on my REST service, and go ahead and paste it in here. The support URI, we're just going to put the homepage to Oracle REST Data Services, real easy. And then support email, you can go ahead and put whatever one you want in here, or you can use the one that we have provided here for you. And paste that in there. And once we're done, next we need to hit roles. So we have the client defined, and then we want to hit roles. And the role that we want to move over, as you can see in the lab here, is we want to use that role that we just created. So we just double click on the role over there. So we move that role. This is the auto rest one. We could do that, but we don't want to do that one right now. There's other ways to do that, but we just want to put the role that we have over there. Once we're done, we hit create. And now we have the OAuth client. So at this point in time, our REST service is secured. So I'm going to do this real quick for you here. Let me just go over here and I'm going to open up two browsers and I'm going to show you. So if I go over to my modules, if I go over to this one, if I go to our SQL report one, and I try to run this now, it's going to say unauthorized. So what was just an open API, we now have security on. So how do I talk to this? How do I how am I able to use this? So again, going back to our lab here, what we're going to do here is in our auth client, we're going to hit this 3-button menu and we're going to go get bearer token. Okay. And that's going to give us this token right here. So this is the code. This is the curl code to get new tokens. So this is going to expire at some point later today. So we always need to have these fresh tokens. So this is the way to do it if you have an application that needs to refresh these tokens every time. But we do have a current token. So you want to take this token, hit this copy to clipboard button and save it back into our text editor that we were working on. Okay, so put that in there. And close that. So now back in the lab, we're just going to move on because we're running out of time here. We're going to go and grab the final one we need to use. So grabbing this one. So on step 32 in the lab, just we need to say, and what we've added here is this header authentication. So what we can do is we can start with so let's go back here to our modules and we're going to start with that biz logic code. So here we're going to take this, we're going to go get CRL command. Okay. And we're going to copy this. So now let's go over to our text editor and we're going to paste that into our text editor. And what we need to do is we need to add something on the front end of this. So we need to grab this and then let's go back over to our text editor and let me share the text editor that I'm working with here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and copy and paste this on top of there. And then here's my token that I got. And we're going to put that, replace it with the one that the lab guide had as a sample. So what we've had is we've replaced this initial line. All the rest is the same. You can actually replace this right here and put A1 on there. And we've replaced this top part and we're passing into the header request our authorization token. So now if I take this, copy it, and I put it into our Cloud Shell, so let me just go and open up our Cloud Shell here and paste it in and run this, I see that I can get the answer. Now, if I didn't have this on here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you real quick what happens if I didn't give that header authentication for this one and ran this. It's going to say unauthorized. So I cannot access this here. So you see that we're able to create and put authorization on top of our REST services very, very easily. There's a lot of things we can do. And again, you saw throughout here, we basically did this in a no code method. There was very little code that we used or had to write at all in creating these REST services, as well as securing these REST services. So I think we're just about out of time. So what we can do is we can wrap this up. This lab guide is we have, and I'll put this again into the chat again for everyone who was late or didn't see this. Here is the lab guide for this. You can refer back to this lab guide at any point and run through this exact same thing. Now, again, the database that we created, it's an always free database. It's always going to be free. You will not be charged as your trial account ends at in 30 days. The credits will expire if they're not used. But if this database is still there and it goes into the next month, you will not be charged for it and it'll stick around for as long as you want. And I believe you can create 2 always free autonomous databases within your account, your free trial account. So you can have 2, you can have different types, do different things with them. And again, all the stuff we did here with our database actions, these database actions are available not only on the autonomous cloud, but they're available if you install Oracle REST Data Services on any Oracle database that you have. It's part of it, and it's just one of the options that you have. So that wraps up. Let me just look here for the questions. We have some. Do I need to REST enable a package or procedure or just the object involved in the procedure to create the RESTful service. It all depends on what you're doing. As you saw here, when we created this custom module, this business logic procedure was not REST enabled, but we put a wrapper around it within our template. So that one was not REST enabled, but you can REST enable it if you go and auto REST enable it. It all depends on how you want to do it and what the package is used for. So you have both options within there. So there it is. You have your free account. You have these labs. This lab's going to stick around forever. We'll probably update it as we go on to do this. Now, this is part of one of the live labs that our team does produce. There are actually a few more of these. We did a live lab in a session a little while ago around JSON. So again, you didn't see this here, but we have this whole module for using and storing and working with JSON docs. So you can use this as in essence, you can use the autonomous database like a NoSQL database or a document store database. You can use it here, and that lab will go through working with JSON as well as using the batch load API again to batch load thousands of JSON documents into the database in seconds. So that is another live lab that we do have. So you can go ahead and go to the live labs URL and look for, I think it's called the Choose Your Own JSON Adventure, because we talk about using it as a document store as well as using JSON in the database in a relational method. So you can use either one. There's one more question. If you're on OCI, will you be able to use ORDS to access database tables? Yes, as you saw through here, we were able to use any of the database tables that we created. So as you saw that when we created this table, we did the data loading, we data loaded that CSV, that data went in there, it created a table as well as loaded that database. We REST enabled that table, we batch loaded data into that table, and we use this table as a REST endpoint. And again, one of the things we can do here is we can actually put security on here through this. So I believe if we go REST disable, let me just re-enable it again. So REST enable, actually, you can actually do this in another method. This is just a quick way. If I clicked on this, this is now secured. I hit enable, this is secured. So if I go here, and again, remember we went here and we said, click this command, and we took this URL and it gave us all the data back. So what we can do, if I try this again and I move that thing over, it may make a lie, but it should say unauthorized, and there it is. So now this table is now REST enabled, or is now there's security behind it, and I can no longer get to it as we did before. So again, there's lots of ways to secure it. Doesn't mean that it's just hanging out there. So you can secure this from the start. For a lab, it's easier just to have no security, so it's easy to get to these REST endpoints as we play with them. But as we saw in the fifth part, we can't put security on these endpoints. All right. How do we migrate from an instance to instance? Test to prod migrations. All right. So we have a whole CI/CD lab, as well as some videos that we do. If Jeff Smith has blogged about this, and there's a video on there on moving environments to environments. It's very easy. And we're actually also working on a way to move data pump exports very easily. So the other thing you can do now with the autonomous database, you can actually go and you can actually clone copies of the autonomous database. I don't think you can do it with the free one. You can clone one, but since it's in essence a PDB, you can clone copies. You can go, you can create these extra copies. And we have a whole CI/CD methodology around that, using change management and change capture to move from environment to environment. So not really relevant to this lab, but we do have materials for using that and working with that. I believe we have some slides to wrap this up. So let me go and go back to our slides here. So again, here's some additional resources that we have here. We do have another session coming up, Introduction to Cloud Native. There's the guide for the lab guide is in there. And again, we put this in there, and then how to reach out to us. We do have another developer live coming up, the Java Innovations set of labs in demos and panels and a whole bunch of sessions like this. This is coming up, and you can register now. All you need to just remember is developer.oracle.com, and I think it's at the very top, so you can go ahead there and register for that event. So that is coming up. Here's how you get your Developer Pioneer badge. This is the URL right there, and you go ahead and take that test. It's basically is questions about stuff that we talked about today. Very easy questions. We made them easy so you can just get it really quick. And then we have our next session, as we said, on September 8th. And Tara has been nice enough to add that URL into the chat, so you can go ahead and grab that as well. So that's pretty much it. Let me just leave this back up here so you can just see that URL or grab it from the chat. Thanks everyone for attending today. I hope you got some stuff out of this. At least you got a free account out of it, so you can look at it that way. You got a free account with $500 of credit, so you can go try some other OCI stuff. But again, a lot of the live labs that we have in our live lab set work with our OCI accounts. And a lot of times you can just directly go right into them and start building with those OCI free accounts. And most of the stuff we do use always free resources. So you're never really charged with it, and you can continue to use these and work with these labs as you go on. And again, as long as it has that always free moniker on it, once your account moves over from from the trial account to a regular account, anything that says always free on it, you will never be charged for. And I can attest to that because I have an always free account. As I said, I got my kid's Minecraft server in there running for him and his friends to play on. It's using our ARM processors, and it's an always free account. And I am not charged for using that ARM server. And there's a couple autonomous databases in there that we use for labs as well. So that is there running and ready to use. So again, you could take the quiz at any time you want. You don't have to take it immediately after this. You can do what you want to do, have lunch, have breakfast, have dinner, and then go ahead and go back to the quiz. Again, thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you on the next event.